Before I go on, I'm just gonna go off tangent a bit and mention I was having dinner with a friend yesterday, last night, and he says that Ryan Villaruel of the Sean Soji Caucus. And we were discussing that in Samoa, LGBT there is called, let me get the word right, um, Fa'afafine, which really was very interesting. It certainly feels like how it sounds, and it's a beautiful word. It feels. I just say that because LGBT sounds like a lot of number letters for someone from the Philippines, and sometimes we feel like maybe we have another word to say. That's something more Filipino one day. So maybe our friends from Congress and from the government and all from the other organizations and culture will have a way for us to say LGBT, but in Philippine style. So according to a 2000 study by Vitek Communications, as reported by the Huffington Post, the buying power of the LGBT population in the United States is almost 1 trillion US dollars in 2016. Last year it was 917 billion. Just last June in Japan was announced the country's first index to evaluate corporate efforts to support inclusiveness for LGBT employees and other sexual minorities, spearheaded by the NGO Work with Pride. The Philippines is number one among Asia Pacific nations in narrowing the gap between women and men. According to the World Economic Forum, the Philippines ranks number 7 out of 144 nations in the most recent Global Gender Gap Index. I've done some communications work and design work for international government organizations in the past until recently. And if it's one thing I understand about doing this kind of work, is that in this sector, we are more into the macro version of things, macro. But in the next few minutes, let me take you to a different place, something more personal. There are not so many other demographics that are directly based on love and desire. The LGBT demographic is based on those entirely, I think. Love and desire, people are smiling, acceptance and attraction. Those two are extremely powerful forces in this world we live in. Whether you come from the world of development or industry, these forces shape the data we watch closely every day. We at the LGBT Chamber define diversity to be a source of creativity, innovation, and even empowerment, or I say power maybe sometimes. Plowing through articles and texts and discussions on LGBT, more often these texts take the perspective of minority, oppression, of LGBT as victims or recipients of hate and discrimination. While this is wholly true and prevalent, it's wholly true and prevalent. The chamber exists to highlight another perspective, where instead of different, we say special. Variations, we think, give us possibilities. To have a handicap, we know means to have a unique insight and a unique capability. Of things that are focused and limited, we shout and ask for versatility in the LGBT. When, as a community, we discuss ways to create a safer workplace for our employees, rights for individuals when it comes to protection, privacy, and dignity, we feel that we should also discuss the leadership potential of LGBT in every sector. LGBT as leaders. The Chamber's goal is to activate these LGBT in leadership positions to have them manage and develop for others the change that they have experienced in themselves. A very good example, for example, is our Congresswoman to my left. So, as leaders, they can help people who work for them and who are part of their population. There are various fronts in this world of LGBT advocacy. The Chamber, while not exactly the type to be in most parades and rallies, is in its own way involved and takes the front for industry and commerce and business. When it comes to development oriented initiatives, we realized that we were not the experts of LGBT policy. We're not. We're not the experts of grassroots movements, of LGBT psychology or sociology. We are not part of the academe and not even of the pageants and festivities. What we are LGBT individuals in business. We are professionals. We hire people, we lead business organizations, and at that, we are the experts of ourselves. We have members coming from agriculture all the way to technology. Interesting to see, like gay friends, for example, in agriculture. Very interesting. It's always a good story. I grew up in a boys' school until high school, and I've worked in design, fashion, business, and enterprise. And I've had collaborations in food, hospitality, technology, policy, and government, local and otherwise. I speak male, I speak technology, I speak sugar and spice, I speak Excel, and I speak Prada, although it's been a long time. Good morning, I'm Brian Tenorio, the chair and founder of the Philippine LGBT Chamber of Commerce. I will advise you that from the next few minutes, this conversation will be very soft. No hard sell, not so many numbers, nothing so technical. But please trust me when I tell you that this softness could have been very well the most effective delivery method for bringing on success and driving engagements for us LGBT in business. Softness, I like that word a lot. Softness, as we embrace our diversity, is the hack that we have discovered. Softness can make things happen. Smiling when I say it. In fact, what you can't bring down or put up with intellect, muscle, and brawn, you can set up with softness, finesse, will, and grace. A colleague of mine from our chamber board mentioned how in a boardroom full of men, it just really is a cool thing to be gay, although he's not fairly from the closet. This softness, however not superficially evident, helps him relate to more aspects of any issue. This softness allows him to reach out to various stakeholders and empathize more effectively. This softness brings out of him creative thinking, taken from a broad and extremely wide, sometimes painful, and deep range of personal experiences and feels. Can't believe I got to use that word in a formal conversation. Feels. In our beginning, there was this conversation of whether we should be the business people in the LGBT community or the LGBT people in the business community, or both. The easiest, we thought, maybe because it was most natural and organic for us, is that we could be the LGBT in the business community in this country. Years back, this guy I was hanging out with so often, he was from the tech industry, mildly attractive, asked me to, very fine, very attractive, asked me to accompany him to a product launch among his peers. I mean, why else will I go? That time, I've not yet been to an event of that sort, and I asked him if he'd like me to come along as myself or as something less or something else, something less out there. He said, "What do you mean come as something less out there?" And I said, "I could come as Brian Tenorio myself because I used to work in fashion. Nothing surprises me. Or I could just, and that would mean like a top like this, green boots, maybe big hair that day. Or I could come a bit less or more dressed down." And then he said, while smiling, which is I remember the scene exactly, he said, "Come as Brian Tenorio." Well, that felt extremely lovable and good. I asked again, I'm going to go in this black designer top and green boots, knee high, to a tech event next to you in a suit." He said it's okay. And that felt extremely great. While it certainly feels extremely good to be doing the stuff you love to do, while comfortable in your own skin, and have others as comfortable being around you too, it's only been recently in the last 10 years that I've felt good to be my gay self in business. Sure, it was easy to be my gay self in fashion, but in technology business, I used to own even a factory for shoes production, and I had a staff of maybe 10 men doing stuff with us. It was fairly interesting. Once I realized that I was happy and comfortable being my gay self in business, my output was awesome. I even surprised myself so many times. I remember from 3 years back, I was invited to an event. Execs Meet Tech. It's another tech story. Where I came alone. Where I was one of the execs there to chat up some of my fast there to chat up some of the fast runners of the tech community of the country. In the hall was I with my big hair, boots and a wrap. I like wearing these things. And two female colleagues in a room full of men. While typically that would sound like an enjoyable time, I felt otherwise. I wish there were more LGBT and I wish there were more females in the room for technology. My friend Bess Hepworth, who gives talks about out leadership, sprightly highlights this talent of engagement by calling it gay vantage. And she says sprightly in a meeting one time, "You have that, Brian, when you can." This insight, I think, is severe, actually, but I love it nevertheless. All our lives, we've been navigating through social negotiations with our parents, classmates, office peers, dates and lovers, bullies, and so difficult bosses, social media and government, and also coursing through all this via informal communication. Certainly not position papers or love letters, but more often perhaps a wink here and there, or a half smile when the situation is unpleasant. Informal communication. Here in the Philippines, we must shift our perspective or perception of diversity from being mostly a disadvantage to also an advantage. On some days, your superpower. Our adaptability, resourcefulness, and versatility are characteristics that are required for a successful delivery of any species. Just this year, theoretical physicist Stephen Hawking wrote that technology and automation will wipe out a lot of jobs that involve muscle, precision, and most mechanical skill sets. But jobs that involve compassion, caring, understanding, and human interaction, creativity, and resourceful thinking will be left untouched. With this, it may be easier to theorize that diversity is the future of humans at work. It's one of my favorite slides because it's entirely hopeful. Initially, from my presentations for the chamber, the verbiage we use when describing the population of LGBT in the Philippines would be, let's say somewhere around 2%, very conservatively, to wildly 20% of the population. I'm very hopeful. Wildly is not a usually word we use in business, but that number certainly feels reassuring. We also say 5 to 8% sometimes when we are more sober. One of my most favorite data representations is this from J. Walter Thompson Innovation Group from just earlier this year. According to this market study, more than half of the population of 20-year-olds and younger in the United States are not absolutely straight. 52%, imagine that, 52% of the next generation of citizens would not be absolutely straight. Yeah? It would be easier to imagine maybe this scenario, maybe two young guys, jocks, both members of the high school soccer team, and saying to normally they would not be in romantic ways, but because of this information, you talk to them and they say, "Hey, doesn't matter to me that he's a dude. I mean, I like this person, and that's all that matters to me." It's a different shift of perspective. We must prepare ourselves for the next few decades where we are no longer a minority. Should be enjoyable. We must prepare ourselves for a future where we are a majority, where this form of diversity becomes the biggest demographic in world population. In the United States, in the next 10 years, there will be more LGBT and LGBT OK individuals than Latino Americans, African Americans, American Christians, football lovers, pizza eaters, and even college graduates. This could be the largest demographic any marketer can get his hands on. that diversity could be the largest voting bloc or the largest target market for consumers, the largest audience for media products. Imagine a world of straight indie movies because everything else was diverse, about diversity. So the norm then eventually will be straight in the diversity in mainstream films and not in indie. This 2017, Ogilvy Philippines and the Philippine LGBT Chamber of Commerce will be launching the Philippine Diversity Index by next year. The research and survey will be executed for Ogilvy and the Chamber by TNS Global, a market research company of the Cantor Group. In the recent year of the LGBT Chamber, we have not come across any kind of data or information that directly determines the LGBT population in the country. We don't know how many we are in this country. Imagine if you knew, your dating life would have been more interesting. No information could be frustrating, a frustrating scenario for industry when you need to understand how to develop your communications and products for a certain target market that could be very much 50%, 20% of the population. Or in policy work, governance and politics, if you would like to determine the size of your LGBT electorate. Is the LGBT population in the Philippines sizable enough to campaign to? Will they go out to vote? Will we need policies for population this small or that big? We need to know. The market study will come in two phases. The first phase, commencing this early 2017, will study the LGBT population in Metro Manila only and in the effective age range of 18 to 45 from the ABCD economic brackets. Phase 1 is a call to action, and we hope it starts a discussion of realizing diversity in this country because we need to know. Phase 2 would be expanding this throughout the country with a wider age range to include probably everyone else. We are open for more collaboration, this is a pitch, and partners for this big endeavor as we proceed on to knowing more about ourselves and our communities. There's never been a number before. We have never figured out in the past, or maybe like a real study or a market research study in the past that says how many or how big is the LGBT population in the Philippines. So Ogilvy Philippines and the LGBT Chamber are set to do that next year. We're asking for your help. We're asking for your help because, of course, this of ourselves we need to know. Thank you very much for having me, Asian Development Bank.